Good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. What night is it? It is Monday night, and it is time for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. As always, we're going to go around this esteemed panel, and we're up, and Maya just went upside down. I understand. All right, here we go. we're
I'm
going to
having
go.
technical difficulties. Sorry.
We're going to go around this esteemed panel. And we're going to introduce all of our great guests that are here with us tonight, starting with my colleague and co-worker who leaves me to go and have fun in the sun. However, he is not here in Chicago right now. So, hey, let's say hey to Dr. Douglas Graham. Dr. Graham.
Hey, thank you, Nikki. I do like the sun. I like it when it's warm instead of when it's cold. I'm a retired physician. I worked in the western suburbs for 30 years. And after I retired, I joined the congressman in his office. And let me tell you, that was an absolutely awesome experience. It's a real honor to be here, and I'm going to try and answer your questions if I can.
Outstanding, outstanding. To the Living Legacy Award winner, who was with us on last evening. That's our very own Dr. Terry Mason. Dr. Mason.
Thank you, Nikki. And again, let me just say good evening to all of the listeners that are out there. I'm grateful to be able to be here. I'm equally grateful for the award that was bestowed upon me last night. I deeply, deeply appreciate it. Thank everyone for all the work that was done in CCPA, Cook County Physicians Association leadership, and what have you. And I am also here to try and answer your questions. So, in the words of the late, great Marvin Gaye, let's get it on.
All right now. All right, Greg. Want to say hey to Linda Johnson is with us. She says good evening to everyone. Want to say hey to Connie Taylor, and she said good. All right, Connie. All right. To the man who has the best art in the world, and I really believe that his home is secretly an art gallery. That's our very own Joseph Harrington. Joe Harrington.
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you and Congressman Davis for providing this platform. My name is Joe Harrington. Most of my work has been done in public health and healthcare. I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Mason at the health department as an assistant commissioner. Left there and went to the state health department where I was the regional health officer for Cook County and had the opportunity to serve as an administrative law judge. Glad to be here. Hopefully I can contribute to the conversation and try to answer some of those questions too.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much to that pediatrician endocrinologist extraordinaire, our very own Dr. Sylvia Robinson.
Good evening, everyone. I am an internal medicine and pediatric physician with a subspecialty in peds endocrinology and an interest in obesity medicine, all underlying a health equity focus in everything that I do. Happy to be here and answer any questions that come up.
All right, thank you so very much. I want to say hey to Sister Bonnie, who is here. She's saying good evening to everyone. To that doctor who's known as Dr. 100, who keeps it real, who is all about community health, that specialist extraordinaire. Let's say hey to our very own Dr. Maya Green. Dr. Green.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Nikki, for having this. I'd like to thank the congressman for keeping the health of our community at the forefront of everything because our community definitely needs his help, right? Thank you for creating space for community to come and ask people who do this in different capacities every Monday. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be part of that journey, and we're here to answer any questions.
Outstanding. I want to say hey to Dorothy Murphy, who's here with us. She says hello to everyone. And I don't know if Tarina is still if she's able to join us yet, or if she's not here. So, Tarina, are you there?
Yes, I am, and I'll be joining on camera shortly. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Congressman Davis for creating such an amazing platform for the community to get access to medical information. I'm Tarina Newkirk, third Vice President and Health Committee Chair of the Chicago West Side Branch NAACP. It is nice to be on this esteemed panel of medical professionals. Thanks for having me.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much. And I'm getting your text messages saying that I am shaky. on camera and you're having some problems. I'm about to become a technician in just a few minutes and fix these internet problems that I am having. But in the meantime, we're going to begin this conversation and get ready to take it away. I want to say hey to Virginia Knight, who is here with us. She says, evening to everyone. Well, Doug, take us away. You muted, Doug?
Yeah.
I'd really like to touch base with our audience because I know we've had a couple of sessions recently and haven't had a lot of audience calls. So I want to know if there's anybody who's been with us the last couple of weeks who has some unanswered questions we could start with. Yeah. So as much as I'd like to start that way, I guess I'm not going to have immediate access to those questions. So for me, I've really become concerned about how being a neighbor has changed. And I wonder if anyone on the panel might have some thoughts or some ideas about that, because I know Dr. Mason's talked about the neighborhood he grew up in. And as I see the news media and I see the way that people are responding to each other, I'm really concerned that we've become so detached and so distant from being human that we've lost our ability to connect with each other and resolve differences.
Well, I would say that I agree with that statement. I'm sure we'll embellish as it goes along. And to your point, Doug, I grew up in Inglewood on the south side of Chicago. Yeah. And it was a very different community in those days. We had, I would say 99% of the homes were two-parent families. There were many homes that had extended family. It was not uncommon for a grandparent or someone like that to live in the home with the family. But more importantly, we had a sense of community that everybody in the neighborhood was tied to the other person. And we all functioned that way. And I must say that every adult in that neighborhood had license to correct us as it was necessary. But that was the whole village doing that. And in addition to that, there were things that we learned that we needed to do for the elderly in the community. That is, if they needed the garbage taken out or floors mopped or what have you, you just went down there. And because your mother or father would have gone and already brought them a plate. And they looked around and saw it be done. And they gave you the orders to go ahead and do it. And that sense of community, I don't think still exists over there, at least the last time I was over there, because right now there are trees growing out of the roofs of some of the houses that I live. So very different. And I'll stop there and let others add to their own communities, what they've seen.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in. Having worked with Dr. Mason, he and I know each other's background, and I grew up in Woodlawn, which is just east of Inglewood, where he grew up. And I told people the story of my neighborhood. Actually, I was interviewed by NBC5 on an episode they did around gang violence, and I talked about the neighborhood I grew up in. And mine was similar to Dr. Mason's. I mean, while it probably wasn't the wealthiest neighborhood in Chicago at the time, it probably was on the lower socioeconomic strata in terms of neighborhoods. It was a neighborhood, it was a community, it was a village. I knew everybody on the block. I knew people around the corner. I walked to school every day. I knew people all around me. And things have changed dramatically since then. Fast forward, and I did this interview last year with NBC5, and I took Miriam Brooks on a tour of my neighborhood because my father owned a restaurant on 63rd Street. They were in business for over 30 years. The entire block is vacant now, and the block across the street is vacant. The house I grew up in is a vacant lot. Ironically, I didn't know it at the time, but Emmett Till lived around the corner from me. His house is still standing, but there's several vacant lots in his house. And just south of me on 61st and Road, Lorraine Hansberry, who wrote A Raisin in the Sun, her parents bought a house in Woodlawn too and lived on 61st Street. And I think I've told the story about this before because I really didn't know that she lived that that far away from me or grew up that far away from me. But what was interesting, I found out that the only way that her parents were able to remain in that house was because of a Supreme Court decision. Her father knew someone, a realtor, who sold him the house, knowing he was African American. And when the neighbors found out that he was African American, uh, they wanted to get him out. And that's when there was restrictive covenants in Chicago. And so they took him to court. And the case went all the way to the Illinois State Supreme Court, which upheld restrictive covenants. Then it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court overturned that ruling, which shot down by the Supreme Court's restrictive covenants that actually legalized or made it possible for African Americans to move into Woodlawn. And that was in the late 40s. So there is this history of neighborhoods in decline. And that goes back to the 1950s. But what we see is, and I've said this before, these kinds of challenges to some degree are structural and systematic. They didn't just happen automatically. They're structural and systematic, and you can't change things like that overnight. The final thing is just a general observation about where we are as a species. And I made this observation to some friends of mine because I was interested in evolution and what we know is man evolved over time. And they talk about 200,000. I said that evolution has taking place over 200,000 years. So what I was telling some, and I've been telling some of my friends, given 200,000 years of evolution, I can't understand why we behave why we do today. We should have gotten past the point where we use violence to settle differences, where we harm and kill one another. So it's really a tragedy. But again, a lot of what we see is a result of structural and systematic things that have happened in the past.
So Joseph, I wonder if you could elaborate on that and give some more specifics, because I agree with you, but I'd like to hear some more details.
About which thing did I say?
Well, we talked about structural and systemic things that exist.
Well, restrictive covenants was law.
Yeah.
I mean, there were Jim Crow laws in the South. I mean, so historically, there have been laws and policies have been put in place to keep people back. There's a lot of talk about diversity, equity, inclusion today, but if everyone was treated equally and fairly, we wouldn't even be having that discussion. So a lot of what we see is a result of laws and policies that put one group of people, several groups of people, mostly Black and brown and Native American, and put them in adverse conditions. In public health, we talk about the social determinants of health, and we talk about the impact of where you live has a direct effect on your health moving forward, your health and well-being. And so when you look at some neighborhoods, I mean, you could just see what that my first job was actually working on the west side of the Midwest Community Council. And I call it my first job. It wasn't, because I've been working since I was 16 years old. Yeah. But I got a job on the west side of Chicago with the Midwest Community Council. And I started working on the west side in an abandoned warehouse on Damon and Lake in 1969. And one of the things that struck me, this was a year after the riots, after King died. And I lived on the south side, and there was rioting on the south side, but not nearly as bad as it was on the west side. And I remember driving to the west side and driving down Roosevelt Road and looking at some of the abandoned buildings and what happened. And I thought to myself, this is what Europe must have looked like in World War II. So many people don't remember that, but I remember that vividly and graphically, that it changed my understanding of what was happening in the communities around me.
Mm-hmm. But Doug, I got to just chime in real quick.
Yeah,
when I talked about where I live, we got to understand that there was segregation in housing. Yeah. And Inglewood, we were among the first Black family that moved in that neighborhood, and it wasn't long that after that, the entire neighborhood for 2 to 3 blocks in either direction changed. Mm-hmm. And that changed the character. It was an Italian neighborhood at first, and then they changed a number of things that we could talk about later. But certainly, it did have an impact. And what else had an impact was the change, and I've said this before, the change in what happened with a lot of the employment. Yes, we had teachers and we had postal workers and all other people living in the neighborhood, but we also had a number of people that worked in the auto and steel industries. And the steel industries employed a lot of people, my uncles, my stepfather, everybody. And those things all got changed when they decided to move steel manufacturing away and shut down Youngstown Sheet and Tube and other places that used to make steel. So I'll stop right there.
Yeah, and Dr. Mason reminded me of one thing. All of the businesses on the block were black owned, and across the street were black owned. There was one small grocery store that was owned by a Jewish man, and I used to work in his grocery store. But most of the businesses up and down 63rd Street were owned by black people.
The other thing, I mean, and we talk about this a lot, right? We talk about the importance of looking at legislature. And a lot of times, I know in my family, I hear, "Oh, I don't do politics," you know? And I always tell them, well, politics does you, you know, or I'm not interested in politics. Politics is interested in you. So I always say we have to be aware of how these laws and, you know, can get into whether redlining is in place, allowed to be in place, or out of place, whether funds flow into certain communities, all those things. We have to look at who's supporting. We talked a lot about the systemic dismantling. We use that all the time, right? I want to recall us to the systemic dismantling of the Black neighborhoods, right? And so we have to be, as a group, systemic about rebuilding them, looking at policy, looking at health, those type of things. Where you live down to your zip code impacts your health. It impacts your health, the air you breathe, the particulate matter down to the air you're breathing. Laws can impact that, health can impact that, depending on what's around. The food or nutrition that's available in that area, the jobs that are available in that area, the education that's available in those areas. Those are also components of what we call the social determinants of health, you know? And so we knew this way back when, but I know Harvard published an article, I think in 2011, it said where you live, location, location, location. That's what it was called. Where you live impacts your health, right? The American Medical Association earlier than that in 2006. And recently I was reading the CDC has a page that literally talks about where you live and how it impacts your health. And the last time they updated it was like either June 6th or June 7th, I can't recall, this year. So there are a lot of people paying attention to it. I love that we're talking about it here because our community can pay attention to it. And we may not be like, I'm a physician, I'm not a legislator, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an environmental specialist, that kind of thing. But what I am, I can use the resources that I have, because social determinants of health are all of those things. And we all need to be active in the areas we're knowledgeable in to impact it. So everybody, down to the people who just say, hey, well, I can't do that, but I can vote. When it's time to vote, we have to vote for the people that are going to be adamant about our community, and where they're not, we have to vote them out. Simple as that.
You know, I just want to support what Dr. Moya said, because I can tell you one of my most interesting jobs was to prepare the congressman for the briefing for the budget. And we got to ask people like Alex Azar what you were doing and why you were doing it. And it's very interesting to be in the room to ask those questions and see the responses. And this is why I think you're absolutely right. You have to pay attention to those things and find out who's providing resources and who's taking them away.
Yeah.
Use that voting power to make sure that they're not taking them away.
Yeah.
Because they will.
And they did.
The end. Yep.
And I just I guess wanted to add to me, neighborhoods, right? Underlying um the fact underlying that is the togetherness and the community you form from the people that you're living around and with. And in my experience, we I moved around a lot, like a
Mhm.
lot. When I was younger, I switched schools a lot. I moved and have been in different areas, and whether that was for my parents' job prospects, or to be in a school, a better kind of school district for education purposes, or just the availability of good housing, not to mention like a lot of people that may have been moved out of housing to other areas for different reasons. It's focusing on kind of building that togetherness, I think sometimes is what's missing. And I didn't have it because we moved around so much. When you don't get comfortable in one particular place, then it's hard to build that community and neighborhood that we need.
I'll just add to that some efforts at the community level that are being made to address some of this is really trying to revitalize block clubs. I know as a child, for growing up on race, the block club really was organizing a lot of the neighborhood events. I feel like that got people out of their homes. So I'm excited to see that a lot of the neighborhoods, a lot of the blocks have started to be more intentional about, like you said, getting to know your neighbors, interrupting what I think is just a general sense of apathy for people, and just no concern for your neighbor. Some of that is in place to interrupt it, and I think due to the pandemic interrupting that social piece of going to church, for example, now folks are trying to find some of those things, because I just thought about all of the institutions that exposed me to healthcare: my school, my
Mhm.
church, my block club, all of those things. Hopefully, I'm starting to see them pop back up and become more robust. So I think as the community continues to engage in those activities, we'll see more empathy for others.
I think that one of the other things is that made it more of a community. I gave it a more community feel. Everybody went to school the same place.
Yeah.
I mean, in the morning you would see all of us would stream out of our houses, walk down the block, go over to wherever we were going, whether it was a grammar school or wherever it was. But we all went to school. I mean, we all knew each other because we played together, not only just outside in the neighborhood, but at school too. We were in each other's classrooms. We went, we knew the different schools and knew the routes. We knew all of the different things. And so that sense of community that you just talked about extended even beyond our homes. And our teachers were in touch with our parents. And so there was and then many of us went to church in
Mm-hmm.
the same community that we lived in.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we grew up in Inglewood, 69th and Low, but we went to New French and Missionary Baptist Church, which was right there, right? Not the we could walk to church, and most people could walk to church. In fact, I thought a lot of Catholics people did because they had some Catholic churches in that area. So, and then every job I got, my first jobs were all given to me by African American folks who lived in the neighborhood across the street from me. They had opened up the grocery stores as the Italians left. They took over the grocery stores. They didn't let them fall apart. The laundromats and everything else. And so it provided a source of income for myself and other folks that own the block. And not to mention snow shoveling and everything else we used to do.
So one of the
What no, what Dr. Mason makes me think about is the fact that there were these intact communities that were whole in the context of the community. Everything you needed, you could get was in walking distance. The first dentist I saw him in his house. I mean, so there were things that you could do right there in your neighborhood, and people knew each other, and you knew each other for several blocks. That I went to a Catholic school on the other side of Cottage Grove, and so I had to walk quite a distance to get to school every day. But on my way to school, I knew a lot of people that were going to James and McCosh, which was the grammar school that was closest to me. And a lot of the people that were there were friends of mine. but and Dr. Mason said this earlier, is really interesting that by the time I was in fourth grade, the neighborhood when as I can recall it, it was a mixture of blacks and white. By the time I was 10 years old, 10 or 11 years old, there were no white people in the neighborhood. And I used to wonder, where'd all the white people go? I mean, what happened? What changed? And it wasn't until I was adult and I realized what was happening and I started reading, I understood what had happened. And there probably were some people in my neighborhood that still wondered what, what had happened to all the white people. But I think there's some opportunities. The former mayor did do some significant investments in the south and the west side. And hopefully, the organizations that receive that money will be good stewards of that money and make some improvements in the kind of changes we're talking about to build some infrastructure, to build capacity, to create a neighborhood that allows people to be whole. And I'm sure that the current mayor, Brandon Johnson, will do his best to do that.
I
You
just
know,
like to.
Harrington, it reminds me of something we did maybe 2 months ago, I want to say. There was a town hall uh, on the state of Black health in Bill, Chicago. I know, Nikki Harvey, you were part of that, but part of that, and I would say, I'm wondering if you're out there listening, the people here, what intentional things can we do about it? Because we have a lot of great organizations that are doing the work. I wonder what bringing or continuing to bring those organizations together more often, surrounding the health experience that our community is having, the social service experience our community is having, and coming up with solutions. I think we all know there's not a time in history where a community that's impacted negatively or historically underlooked and overlooked and underserved comes out of that by someone else. So it's gonna have to start with us, and it's already started. I'm wondering, call to action, if on this show we can start to bring kind of updates about where the community events are, what we should be concerned about as far as our community thriving, the dollars that are going into our community, and the health status. Just updates on that if we can make that a regular, and where these places are. So the same people that are watching virtually, now that COVID is there, we can certainly watch the updates virtually, but we can come together and see each other in person and strategize around the impact we're going to have on our community.
Outstanding. Well, want to say hey to Nellie Purnell King, who is here. She says, good evening to everyone. Pastor Crystal Bennett Kyles is here with us as well. And she says, good evening. Linda Johnson says, I would like to know what the chicken box status is in our community. I think she means pox. So I think she's saying chicken pox. Let's answer that question really quickly, and then I'll go back to our hello. So do we have an answer for her for that question?
I don't know that. Oh, I'll wait for someone else. I don't know that chicken pox is one of the things on the rise. There were some measles.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Don't everybody jump at this question at one time now.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Dr. Maya. I have not seen anything in the public health strings that I've been getting that show anything about chicken pox or anything else other than the measles, at least at this time of the year. We've kind of gone through RSV and a few others.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe there's some question simply because of the monkeypox that that came up earlier, and so maybe people are kind of thinking of the monkeypox, and is chickenpox and those kinds of things are still there. I think but I've not heard of anything in terms of any outbreak of chickenpox in our community.
Okay. So Linda Johnson also says, I remember Dr. Harrington. So I guess she was answering something that Joe was talking about a little earlier. Edna Weatherspoon is here with us, and she says, good evening, all. Well, hey, Beyonce. For those of you who don't know, that's really Edna's name. It's Beyonce. I say hey to Reverend Wilbur Cook, who's here. Wilbur says, living investment in community is so important, and that's very important. Linda Johnson, oh, she's answering that question. She says that it was a outbreak in a police station. Linda, by any chance, do you know what district that was? If you do, send me that really quickly. If you know the district, Maya, you're nodding. Are you familiar?
Yeah, there was an outbreak in one of the districts of measles. That's what I thought they were talking about.
Okay.
So there was a presence of measles and amongst some kids, and what I believe was done at that time was an opportunity to. What they did was they stopped moving the children with the measles around, and now it seems to be going down. We are looking into seeing what else we can do, but I believe at this time, initially it was controlled, and that was, I believe, either 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, and I don't recall the district specifically, but there was and it was a small outbreak, but there was an outbreak of measles.
Okay. Jamae is here with us and she says yes. And hello to everyone. Jackie Robinson Ivy says, I would like to know what is being done within the medical community to talk about how Black women are assumed to be able to tolerate pain. Oh, I think it's called masking. I have witnessed it myself in the past, but more recently, a relative was not assumed to be as sick as they were, and they were fine. And when they finally got treatment, it was an acute condition. It is an African American physician who realized that my relative was not being treated for pain properly. So I want to kind of start this conversation off because this has been an issue for a number of years. And there are some bills that we've even written to work on some of this because it really showed its ugly head with people who suffer from sickle cell. So I want our doctors to begin to have this conversation just as well. And I see every doctor on the panel nodding. So let's talk about this, how it is really assumed that African American and especially African American women can tolerate more pain.
Hmm. So the University of Virginia did a study amongst the medical students, actually, and residents, about how different people from different backgrounds experience pain. And they found, like, clearly that when Black women report their pain, because they don't say it like white women, it's assumed not to be true, right? And so they can say, I'm in pain, and hold their face straight. They can say, I'm in pain, or they can scream, I'm in pain. A lot of times, if they raise their voice, and when they say they're in pain, they were thought to be drug seeking. And it was all about how we understand people based on how their tone, the way they speak, things like that. We have so many examples. We have Serena Williams. We have so many examples of people going in places.
Tatiana Ali.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many. And this
Yeah.
there is no financial economic barrier that comes into play here. It really has a lot to do with the color of our skin. So sometimes I think that's the elephant in the room that we tend not to address or talk about. You know, I know we were talking about a number of different things here, but I do want to share this, and you guys know that I relatively never share personal stuff. Very now and then I will throw a snippet of something out here. But in the early 70s, when we moved into the Austin area, we were the first African American family to move on our block. And I'm talking early to mid 70s. And there was a cross burned in our front yard. And my dad moved us back down to my grandfather's house really quickly. You know, my mom and myself, just to kind of protect us down there. And him and his friends, my father was not just a pastor, but he was also a man from the military. So he wasn't going to leave his house that he invested in too quickly. But he stayed there, and things changed because that's where I ended up growing up at, going to Catholic school. But when we first moved there, and I know you guys, I know there are a lot of people listening who have a hard time understanding what I'm saying when I say the early to mid 70s. when there was a cross placed in our front yard in the 5900 block over in that Austin area, right on the edge of Austin, that very last block before you get to Austin. And they lit that cross on fire in our front yard and then took the Coca-Cola bottle that had some type of substance in it and pitched it through our front window, all because of the color of our skin. So we cannot ever forget the elephant in the room, and we must remember that we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something because I stepped away because I want to get a copy of a book that I got called Medical Apartheid by a Black doctor, Harriet Washington. And in it, she talks about James J. Marion Sims, who was at one time known and may still be known as the father of modern gynecology. And most of his work was done on slave women. He asked people to send him slaves so that he could experiment on them. And he did gynecological surgery on them without the benefit of the anesthesia, because it was the thought at that time that Black women were less sensitive to pain. Yes. And so while they may scream and shout, they didn't feel pain to the same degree because we were lesser human beings, because at that time we were still 3/5 of a person. So maybe that these were people that probably were less likely to suffer from any kind of pain. But that's been discounted long ago, that that's not the case. But there is still this thing of conscious and unconscious bias. Yes. And so there are these biases. Another example would be women don't present with the same kind of symptoms when they're having a heart attack. And so sometimes they go to the hospital and they're having a heart attack, and they're trying to get some help, but doctors mistake it. Well, you don't have the traditional symptoms of somebody, because a lot of this is a lot of research, years ago was done predominantly on men, so we didn't know anything. Actually, when I was involved in recruitment at Rush for the Women's Health Initiative study, which was one of the largest studies of women's health ever done, I was surprised to find out that most of the research was done on hormonal replacement therapy, was done on both men and women, and mostly men more so than women, because women didn't actually participate in studies to the degree that men did. So there was no real data about the safety of hormone replacement therapy until that study was done, which was done exclusively on women. So there are examples of this throughout history, throughout time, even recent examples of these biases that people have, and they take with them to the workplace. So that still happens to this day.
Yep. There was a series that was aired called Unequal Treatment some time ago. Right. And in that series, I mean, if you ever go back and try and find it, you'll see a lot of things documented about not just pain medication, but the offerings of many kinds of therapies were different between Blacks and whites. And I thought it was a really good series that they did. And I would implore any of us to look at these, go back and see if you can find these documentaries, because it's eye-opening. And we got to, just as a caveat, the operation for vesicovaginal fistulas were done on Black women without anesthesia at all. And this procedure is when now vesicovaginal fistula is when there's a hole between the bladder and the vagina. And so the urine leaks out the vagina. Mm-hmm. And there's an operation that you use to fix that. That operation was done on Black women without anesthesia and perfected with Black women without anesthesia. And then we still use that operation today, where that's still an appropriate operation. But I just want you to know, Black women have paid the price. And even in unequal treatment, even men who had pain no matter what it was, were getting less pain medication than their white counterparts.
So here's what we do. I mean, we have all this great information behind it, but here's one thing that we have to make sure that we do. We have to report when things like this happen. We have to let our voice be heard when things like this happen. So I want to make sure that I let Miss Robinson Ivy know, when you get the opportunity, encourage your relative to report it. Encourage your relative to report it. Please do. Please make sure that it's reported. This is a time not to be silent. Remember, we often talk about, when you go to the doctor, this is the place where you are not to be silent at. You should have notes when you go to the doctor. You tell the doctor what is going on with you. This is a conversation that you have. You have to have it. When I go to the doctor, I have a conversation. You got to have a conversation. And this is why you need to get to know your doctors. I mean, just something so simple. If Dr. Erica Taylor was here on this evening, she would say, if a OBGYN comes in the room with you and they have a speculum larger than the medium, you should leave. And you should. So this is not the time to be quiet. You know, Crystal Bennett Kyles, Pastor Crystal Bennett Kyles says, I hear there is a correlation between a lot of vacant lots in a community and mental health illness, poverty, and addiction. Anybody want to attack that? Do I hear radio silence? Okay, go ahead.
So one of the things that I might say, Nikki, is that I'm not an expert in this, but if you look at communities that have little hope, you'll find more drug addiction. Whether it be Black, Native American, when there aren't opportunities, when there are things that are not available, when your future isn't very good, you'll find the drugs and the drug addiction. So I would not be surprised when there are vacant lots, economic poverty, loss of development, loss of opportunity. I would be surprised if that's where the drug dealers go, because that's where they know where the market is.
Well, I'll add, for sure, the answer to the question is yes, there's a correlation between vacant lots, littering, and not only crime, but also depression. Yes. Those things are absolutely linked. Green space has been known to improve feelings of depression. And I'm sure you can imagine growing up and being fully aware of how destitute your community is and how your community just does not have the institutions and the infrastructure to meet your basic needs might cause someone to value their life less or question their worth. So I definitely will say that all of those things do play an active role in a person's mental health, just like being on the beach make you feel better. Having a clean, safe, and fully occupied community makes you feel better. So I would say there's absolutely a correlation.
Yeah, a lot of times, and we use terms. Correlation means there's a relationship between two things, and a lot of times we do research to show that there is a direct relationship between those two things. That's sometimes why they do research. Mm-hmm. But what we know, and I know that there was a lot of talk about this, probably maybe about 15 years ago, where they were saying that your zip code is more important than your genetic code than determining your health moving forward. It's where you live that has a greater impact on your health than your genetics. And we've also talked about the fact there is this phenomenon called transgenerational trauma. And we know for a fact, the scientific fact, that trauma can be passed on for generations. So all those taken into consideration, there's enough evidence that we know about where we can make the statements that we're making. And yeah. I would think that anybody that lived in some of the neighborhoods in the city of Chicago, they walked out their door, would look around, look at their conditions, and unless they felt that they really had a way out of those conditions, might be depressed, you know. Yeah. Once they realize that this is where I am, this is all I got, and I don't see any chance to get out. I mean, that could cause depression.
Yeah, well, I would like to just throw another little wrench into this fire, because I mean, and what I'm going to mention here is conditioning, and what conditioning means that if certain circumstances, situation, and conditions surrounds you, you do one or two things. You become frustrated in your fight to try to get out of it, or you succumb to it, and because it's probably easier to survive and to and from a mental standpoint to adjust to as opposed to fighting. However, fighting is really the way to get the condition resolved. But if you don't have that fight day after day after day after day, it doesn't change. And so these conditions are not really just circumstances that happen. They're conditions that that were placed and created with a purpose, and that purpose is being achieved. Now, the ultimate thing that one must look at is this: is if somebody is standing on your foot, and you're feeling the pain, you can either sit silently or you can try to do something to remove them. Not really wait until they decide I'm going to get off your foot. And so I think that what I'm trying to say here is that the answer has to come from within. Not It's not going to come from without. I mean, those things that is brought in to help us is one thing, but the real answer has to come from within the community, within us. We have to come together and say, you know what, we need to figure out ways and not wait for somebody else to get this thorn out of my side. I have to We have to be able to remove it ourselves and to begin to do work on how we're going to deal with it, because that's the answer. I mean, what I'm saying is, how long does it take us to realize that that's not going that these things are just not things that just happen because by accident. I mean, they're too consistent in the way that they are that in the way that they occur to be an accident. Therefore, we can't really look at it and say that if an accident keep happening every day, then we have to look around to see who's making this happen. And I think that that's is what's going to be needed. I mean, we looked at situations in terms of how our community has changed and how when we moved into certain neighborhoods that we were not had not been members of prior to, how it changed when the makeup of the neighborhood changed. So what I'm saying is, if Austin was at one point in time a great high school, a good high school, why did that change when the population changed? And so we have to look at those things and say, well, is that an accident? I don't think so. I think there has to be some. Um, uh, I mean, there has to be some responsibility on us, not because it's something that we've done, but it's because it doesn't occur without without we doing something to change the situation, change the things that are there that are keeping us in conditions that make us sick, conditions that cause us to die at an earlier age than other populations. So, hey, that's the fight that we have to fight, and we can't really ignore that. It's called self-preservation. We're going to have to preserve ourselves and make certain that we do things to overcome some of these things that are difficult for our people to deal with.
Dr. Miller, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with much of what you say. But we have to remember that when these neighborhoods began to change, that's not just an accident. There's been some intentionality behind those neighborhoods changing. And when I think about where I grew up, and that went from a neighborhood that was very, very desirable at one time to now not desirable at all. But there were some things that happened. Things like crack cocaine got introduced into communities. Things like uh, the availability of living wage jobs disappeared. There were a lot of or went away, and a lot of that was, a lot of times we look at what's happening thinking it happened today, but if we look at what's happened, that was set in motion years ago. We just didn't know it. And so, and I'm not saying that we don't have anything that we can do, but how do you explain communities that were very thriving communities like the one I grew up in, where everybody was employed, but when when a lot of the places start laying off, when the steel mills start laying off, when all of these major corporations left, and there was nothing left to replace them, and the people didn't have work. What did you expect to happen? And if you look at the schools, and we could look at the schools in that same neighborhood now. I mean, as a neighborhood where I went, but now if I go look, and we're going to be looking at the Illinois report card, if you go and look at the Illinois report card, all the test scores for every single school in the state of Illinois is reported. And we're looking right now as we're trying to work on programs for pre-med type programs, or pre-science or pre-STEM type programs. We're looking in our communities, and we don't see that there is a lot of that education even happening. So we have to really look deeply. And I'm not saying who's necessarily at fault, but there are a number of things that are happening that did not just happen, but are a lot of times large tracts of land have already been predetermined to become something else at a much later time, and we don't even know those plans are in effect. So we just need to make sure that we take the time to really look at what's really going on, and not just what happens when it happens, but why it happened and who is really behind it.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. No, I was going to agree with him with what Dr. Mason has said. But again, we gotta push that weight off our foot. It's not a question of who. Sometimes it's not really a question of who responsible, but it's not going to change. As you said, it was never an accident. There was some design things that occurred. We might not have been aware of them at the time that the seed was planted, but it was planted, and it became a tree. And we can't really look at that tree and be contented with that, saying that we need those that planted this tree that's in the middle of my street, that keep me from driving down my street, to come back and remove it, because they don't plan to do that. They planted with a purpose. And so, and when I say I'm saying there are things that have happened that are not good for the community that we live in. Um, that there are things that are happening that are not good for the health of the people that are in the community. But that's how it is in war. That's how war works. And we would like to think that we're not really involved in a situation, but we must call it what it is. I mean, we have to call it what it is, and that's just what it is.
And I want to jump in, and I know we're getting close to time. And we did at one point start talking about people voting and elections that come up, but we have a responsibility and obligation to vote. We elect our officials one way or the other. Either we vote for them, we don't for them, they still get elected. So if you're not voting, you can't say that I didn't have anything to do. You may have, because you may have voted for somebody else. But as we talk about all this, we have been represented by people that look like us, sound like us. Many of those people have the same backgrounds and experiences that we do. And I think they are fighting for them, but they need our support, they need our votes. So I think that some of this gets back to our just a very basic responsibility as a citizen, and because we do have this opportunity as right to vote, is to exercise that franchise and vote when the opportunity comes. And if a person is not serving or doing what you think, then you vote against them. But vote for somebody who's going to work in your best interest.
Absolutely. And also, with our representatives, strength and power to get things done, oftentimes depends on the strength of the community that they represent. If the community is viewed as being a weak community, in the sense that it doesn't vote, it is not proactive in terms of getting out and making certain that the things that are going are not in its favor, are identified and that they're called out. So that is our community. That's our responsibility, is to, like you say, vote for the person that really is concerned about the community, but also to make certain that we are there giving strength to that individual ability to get things done. I mean, as you're saying, if a person is elected and only 30% of the people or 25% of the people or less turn out to vote, and so what happens? What are the other 70% doing? As you said, if we stand on the sidelines and say, I had nothing to do with it, but you did, because you did not have, if you had an input or you didn't. And if the input happened to be a person that you don't think is representing you properly, then you still had something to do with it. And so we have to make certain that again, that we're together, that we exercise our power and express our ideas, so that then that person also feel empowered and is empowered to make changes and to put forth whatever has to be put forth to make the changes that are necessary to make the community better.
I will say again, I think it goes to what I was saying. Poverty is a strategic form of oppression. It leads to everything we talked about today. And I love that we're not just stating that and saying, oh, well, Dr. Graham brought in talking about hope, right? And so hope is our way of, is the start. It's the spark. Like, you get ready to light your stove, you got a pilot. It's a pilot. And now I think definitely more so in the community now than ever, we need to take that spark and turn it into a flame of action. Coalesce all the things, whether it's social determinants of health, nutrition, education, identify who's uplifting for our community, bring us together, and grow from there. Better, stronger, together.
Well, I would say, I agree with you. I would agree with you, Maya, but I would say this, that power, what does it say? Power concedes nothing without a demand. And if we don't see, our democracy is not a leave it alone after the voting democracy. Yeah. It's a participatory democracy, which means you got to participate before, during, and after. Yeah. Because we don't elect little Jesus Christs. We don't elect no gods. We elect people who have to work through a system. And having been a part of the city and the county, understanding a bit more how this works on a real level, it don't work if people don't participate all the way through. And that's what we do. We elect somebody and think that they're going to do it, make everything happen for us. No, we got to stay on the course for whatever it is that we want. We got to stay on the course with those people to make sure that the participation doesn't wane and doesn't come back until after the election again. No, we cannot live like that. That's not the way the people who have these. When I drove the bus for the CTA, I learned how segregated this city was by ethnicity, not race, ethnicity. And these people all had their own little communities where they spoke their languages, had their stores and everything else. And until we continue to build those kinds of things for ourselves and do what our foreparents used to do, they used to meet at the places and have decisions about who was going to be alderman and why and that sort of thing. It was participation. And we had a strong business community that was strong in our community, which is a whole nother conversation that we need to talk about, because without strong business communities, you ain't got nothing.
Yeah.
We have no kitchen conversations anymore. And Dr. Mason, even if they elected little Jesuses, what did the Bible tell us? Faith without works is what? Dead. So even with the Lord, you still working.
That's right.
You're still working. You're just working on a different plane. So we're still working, but you got to work. And we need to begin to buy into each other. That's the next thing we need to do. We need to buy into each other. Yolanda Williams says, good evening, everybody. Virginia Knight says, I can't take the thought off of it. Jackie Robertson Ivy says, this has been very helpful. Exactly. You know, I've already done so. Well, I know you had, but I had to put it out there for everybody else. And we are also able to were able to make the special mention of the African American doctor who realized that the relative needed better pain management. Jamae says, amen. Crystal Kyles is thanking everyone who commented and helped her along the way with her question. And she always says, wow, a purpose. And I'm loving the fact that she talks about you had to have that purpose. She also says, thank you to each and every one of you who were commenting. Wilbur Cook says, our communities are just like Tulsa. But what, I skipped something that I do want us to answer, and I want to go back, and that's Dorothy Murphy's question. And that's going to be our last question of the evening because we have met our time. But Dorothy had a very interesting question that I loved, and I saw it earlier, notated it, and wanted to go back to it. She says, why do Black women who live in the right zip code still have higher maternal death rates?
I'll take a crack at that.
Sure.
And then I'll let Maya go.
Okay. We're going to go around that circle. Go ahead.
Yeah. Dr. Mason already mentioned the series Unnatural Causes. And one of the segments dealt with this very issue of infant mortality and the fact that Black women, regardless of income and education, were having similar incomes during the birthing process. I don't know if there is a biological or a scientific answer for a question like that. The state of Illinois has actually formed a task force that's looking at the issue. It's a task force on infant and maternal mortality amongst African American women. So there's a task force that's already exists. I think they're in their third year. They've already done 2 reports. And you go to the state health department's website and get more information about that. But the one thing they have in common is similar experiences and moving forward. And we talked about this thing of transgenerational trauma, and I want to bring that up again. There's some things that you cannot escape, no matter what. You can't escape your genetics in some respect, and you can't escape your zip code. And you may have come from a neighborhood, and you got a good education, you got a good job. You might be a doctor, you might be a lawyer, you might be a professional, but that doesn't mean that some of what happened early in your life puts you in a situation that you would have this kind of outcome. So they're looking to see if there's some answers, but I don't think there are any answers other than some of the things we've already talked about.
Maya?
Absolutely. It goes back to kind of everything we said here, all the way back to Sarah Bartman, all the way back to Henrietta Lacks. Then looking at what they mentioned already about Serena Williams, what Dr. Marion Sims has done, but also just as recently as 2016 at University of Virginia. They literally thought, half of the medical students and residents interviewed literally thought, medical students and residents, Black women had thicker skin than white women. That was 2016. So we're not very far in thought as a people, as some of the people from where we were back then. So that's why, even when, and this was a study where the women literally said the same thing. They had the same script, said the same thing, and still pain was perceived as less. So that has a lot to do with it. And so if you're doing that, you're going to have a poorer outcome because the response to save your life isn't as quick. It takes some time to then figure out. And a lot of times, by the time they figure it out, look what happened to that Black physician during COVID. She literally said, I have COVID, I can't breathe, and was videotaping herself. And she still had a poor outcome because they did not believe her.
Wow. Well, still got a ton of questions and comments, and I promise you that we will grab them on next week. But I got to tell you something. We've got our time, and I know you guys hate when I say that, but we are at our time. So as always, we're going to go around and we're going to have our Until Next Mondays. And for the person who keeps texting me saying, Nikki, are you sleepy? You keep yarning. I'm not sleepy. Here's the problem. I work a lot. And when people think that we don't do stuff, when people tell me you all don't do anything, I smile and bear it and grin and bear it. But we work a lot, a whole lot. And when I sit still for 15 minutes or more, it like everything comes down. That's all it is. My house looks like I literally come in here and change my clothes and walk back out the door, because a lot of times that's what I do. So when we were talking about how areas look and how you feel when that happens, I am literally sick on the stomach because I need to clean my house, but I don't have time this week to actually get to it. So I got to do a little bit every night, which means I won't probably get to bed tonight till probably 12 or 1. And I have a 7 o'clock meeting in the morning. So we work a lot. So no, I'm not sleepy. I'm wide awake. I've just sat here for 15 minutes or more. And when I sit still like that, that happens. So no, I'm engaged. I'm listening. I'm not sleepy. But what you could do is just send me some tea, because I'm a teaaholic and I'll be open to that tea. So send it to me. Doug, you're until next Monday.
Well, first of all, Nikki, I want to support you because when I worked in the congressman's office, everybody was busy. Not only are they very busy, but some were working a second job just so they could stay and work in the congressman's office. So that's the facts. They are very busy. But I want to go back to what Dr. Miller said about making your vote count, because every time you vote, your vote counts. Not this election, but the next election. Because when that congressman's in office and he's deciding what to vote on this bill, he's going to be looking at who voted for what. And he knows he's got to get the maximum number of votes to get reelected. So every time you vote, you register. You put down your needs and your wants and your opinions, so you got to vote.
Thank you. Outstanding. Dr. Mason, you're until next Monday.
I'll just say it, sum it up like this. Ain't no cavalry coming.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just say it. Ain't no cavalry coming. Ain't nobody gonna do nothing for us but us. And us don't do it, it ain't gonna get did. And the other part of that, the last part of that is this. This is something our foreparents knew and they acted on. This is something that everybody that comes to this country, people that can't even speak the language, they clear about being that they're getting their us's together to do what they need to do. And we need to do the same thing. And I'll leave it with this. Daniel Hell Williams built a hospital a long time ago called Providence Hospital because Black folks didn't have anywhere good to go. And I'm telling you that to me, we're almost right back to that point from one point of view. And we need to be thinking about how do we build our own? Because we went from over 400 Black hospitals across the United States to now to zero, which means our places for our residents to train. And as Dr. Williams did, for nurses to training of all types can be done in a hospital, but we got to have one. And now we don't have any across the entire United States. And we have got to fix that.
Outstanding, outstanding. And yes, I love what I do. So you still comment. So just so you know, I'm not complaining. I love what I do. And I love the differences I get the opportunity to make, and I do it because that's what I love to do. But we work a lot, a whole lot. I'm up when you sleep, and I'm working when you going back to bed. So we do a lot. All right, Joe, you're until next Monday.
I've got two. One, I'm going to pick up and on Doug's original question and answer it. And I've told people this. I think what we're seeing in our city right now is a mashup of two books. I think I've said it here before: A Tale of Two Cities and The Lord of the Flies, all in one. That's what we're seeing right now. We're better than that, and we can do better than that. And what I want to leave you with, I had the opportunity to attend Congressman Davis's announcement that he was running for re-election on Saturday. And I intentionally wore my James Baldwin t-shirt because it makes a statement that's important. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced.
That's
we have
right.
to face the
I love
problems
that
and confront
t-shirt.
us.
I love that t-shirt. I took a picture of it when you had it on. I loved it. I loved it. Wilbur Cook had some comments, and thank you so much, Wilbur, and we're going to address those next week. Dorothy wants Mr. Harrington and Dr. Maya to know that she thanks you so much for answering her question. Kim Alexander Jackson is here, and she says, thank you to everyone for being so informative. She also says, amen. And thank you to Kim. Dr. Miller, you're until next Monday.
I just want to echo what Dr. Mason said, and I think we really have to look at it that way. The cavalry ain't coming; it's already here, and it's us. And so, regardless of what it should be, doesn't make a difference. The fact what it is what we must deal with, and what it is that we are going to have to take these problems head on, address them, organize ourselves in a way that we can overcome them, or we won't. If we fail to do this, then we fail to change. And we'll be here for 100 years from now talking, well, we won't, but somebody will, talking about the failure without really looking at the problems and figuring out what really need to be done unless we do it. It doesn't, like I said before, it doesn't make any difference about who put the knife in your back. Get it out. That's what's important. Get it out.
All right, Deke, I am now about to pass the plate. Between you and Dr. Mason, y'all be taking Texas around here. I'm about to pass the plate. Dr. Robinson had to leave early, but she sent her until next Monday because she wanted you guys to hear it. She says, Nikki, please pass on my thoughts for the next week. And that is to try to learn something new every day with at least one new fact about your past and your family. So thank you, Dr. Robinson, for sharing that. Dr. Maya Green, you're until next Monday.
Until next Monday, these changes start with us. I'm interested in seeing where we go with this. We see a lot of times when people talk about it. I'm so excited to be about it. Nikki, I love those town halls. I challenge you. I dare you do another one.
Oh, it's coming up very soon.
Okay.
I want you guys to be prepared for June 27th. We will have a mental health town hall at the South Loop Hotel. So yeah, we got some good stuff coming up. And all of you will be involved. Thank you so much. Well, to the Sutton family, Tyrena, I know you haven't until next Monday, but little Sutton, is there anything little Sutton would like to share until next Monday? Do you at least want to wave and say until next Monday? All right, so that's little Sutton's until next Monday. Tyrena, you're until next Monday.
Yes, I just want to say until next Monday, happy early Father's Day to the men and the dads on the call. And of course, hopefully everyone is getting educated on something related to Men's Health Month this month. And then lastly, I just wanted to say activate. It is time for us to get together and activate and to mobilize. I appreciate everyone who joins these calls virtually, but there are events happening all around the city, especially around the West Side, and we need people in the building. We need people to show up and support the efforts to educate the community. So hopefully you find at least one event with all of the stuff going on with Juneteenth. You find at least one event to support because a lot of hard work and effort goes into making these events happen for the community.
Outstanding. Just want to remind everybody about Juneteenth. Want to also say happy Father's Day to all the dads that's out there. June is Men's Health. So want to remind you guys on next Monday, just like last year. So this will be our anniversary next Monday. Next Monday, Dr. Terry Mason will be leading the conversation. We will have a men's only conversation on next Monday. So want to remind everyone who is on the call, who is listening, to invite men to listen and learn. Invite men to share their questions. Remember that they can be anonymous if you like. No question is too big or small. No question is off the table. The men will have a discussion on next week. Remember, join us next Monday night for Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where the men will have the conversation. Now, there is one additional thing that I want to share. Yes, make sure you have the latest trendy vaccine for your COVID. Make sure that you are up to date on your vaccines. And once again, if you are somewhere and you don't feel that room is safe enough for you to be without a mask, guess what? Put it on. People are still testing positive for COVID. So now, make sure you're up to date. And if you're somewhere and you don't feel safe or you don't feel comfortable, just put your mask on. It's okay. Thank you, and see you on next Monday. Bye now.